Silence descended on that courtroom the moment Marcus Thompson reached into the brown paper bag. Not because eating during a hearing was the issue, it was what the bag contained that stopped everyone cold. A single granola bar and a juice box with cartoon characters printed on the side, packed for his 6-year-old daughter. 37 years on this bench had given me confidence that I had witnessed every variation of human circumstance a courtroom could produce. What this man was about to lay before me that morning made me examine something I had long taken for granted, whether justice and the law are always pointing in the same direction. Marcus stood before me on a Tuesday morning in April, a citation in his hand representing a total of $5,000 in accumulated fines. $5,000 that the city had assessed for what the official record described as repeated violations of street vendor regulations. He was 32 years old. The shirt he wore had a small tear near the collar that someone had taken the time to stitch carefully back together. His shoes were worn down to the point of showing their age, but they had been polished before he walked through those doors. Everything about his appearance communicated two things at once: exhaustion and dignity, occupying the same body, refusing to give way to each other. The prosecutor presented the case. Marcus had accumulated 17 citations across a 6-month stretch for operating a food cart without the required permits at various locations throughout the city. Each individual violation carried a $300 fine. He had paid none of them. The total had grown through compounding penalties into the $5,000 figure now before the court, and the city had come to collect. I looked at Marcus directly. "Mr. Thompson, do you understand the charges before you?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you have been operating without the proper permits?" "Yes, Your Honor." No hedging, no attempt at deflection, just a straightforward acknowledgement. That kind of directness is rarer in this room than people might imagine. Most defendants arrive prepared to fight, explain, or justify. Marcus simply stood there, accepting responsibility for something I had not yet fully understood. "Mr. Thompson, these permits are not a significant financial barrier. A street vendor license in this city runs $250 annually. What prevented you from obtaining one?" He shifted his weight slightly. "I tried, Your Honor, 3 separate times." The prosecutor stepped in. "Your Honor, the defendant's applications were denied on zoning grounds. He continued applying for locations that fall outside areas approved for street vending." I raised my hand. Something about that explanation was not sitting right. "Mr. Thompson, if you were aware those locations were not approved, why did you continue setting up in them?" "Because those are the only locations accessible to me during those hours, Your Honor." Something important had just entered the room. "Explain what you mean by that." Marcus took a breath. "Your Honor, I am working 3 jobs. My overnight shift as a security guard at Memorial Hospital runs from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. After that, I drive for a rideshare company from 7:30 until 2 in the afternoon. The cart runs from 2:30 until 6 in the evening. The locations the city has flagged as non-compliant happen to be the only ones situated between where my rideshare shift ends and where I need to be to collect my children from school at 6:15. 3 jobs. Those 2 words settled into the courtroom air and remained there. "You have children, Mr. Thompson?" 3, Your Honor. Maya is 8, Jacob is 6, and Daniel just turned 4. "And their mother?" His jaw moved almost imperceptibly before he answered. "She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." The room produced that particular quality of silence I have come to recognize over decades on this bench. It is the sound of assumptions falling apart quietly all at once. I looked back at the citation record. 17 violations across 6 months. By rough calculation, that averages to roughly 1 every 10 days. Mr. Thompson, given that frequency, why not simply stop operating in those locations? Why keep putting yourself in a position to be cited? "Because I need that third income, Your Honor. Without it, rent becomes impossible." The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, while the defendant's personal circumstances are difficult, the legal standard is clear. These regulations serve the purposes of public safety and fair commerce. Creating exceptions based on hardship would open the door to every defendant presenting similar claims. He was not wrong on the legal question. That was precisely what made the moment so difficult to navigate. My path to this bench was not built on limiting my interest to what was technically legal. It was built on caring about what was right. And occasionally those two things stand on opposite sides of the room with very different things to say. Mr. Thompson, take me through your day. Start from the moment you wake up. He looked uncertain, as though the question might be a test of some kind. What time do you get up? Following the end of my security shift, I get approximately 3 hours of sleep, so I am up around 10 in the morning. From there, I get the children organized for school. Maya is old enough to help with the younger two, but breakfast still needs to be made, lunch is packed, homework checked. I have them at school by 11:45, and then I begin the rideshare shift. When do you eat lunch, Mr. Thompson? The question landed differently than he expected. It landed differently than the prosecutor expected as well. But I ask questions for reasons, always. I generally do not, Your Honor. There are snacks in the car. Show me what you brought with you today. Marcus paused, then reached into his jacket and withdrew the brown paper bag. He opened it with the careful movements of someone slightly embarrassed by what was inside. One granola bar, one juice box with cartoon characters. That is your lunch for today? It was supposed to be Maya's after-school snack. I did not manage to grab anything else this morning. I looked at that juice box for a long moment. This man was operating on 3 hours of sleep, managing 3 jobs, raising 3 children without a partner, and the item he had brought to eat while awaiting his hearing in a courtroom was his daughter's afternoon snack, set aside because he had been too occupied with everyone else's needs to attend to his own. The prosecutor shifted in his seat. He could see where things were moving. But what no one in that room was aware of yet was something I had noticed in Marcus's file. A detail so small that it had escaped everyone else's attention. That detail was about to become the center of everything. I leaned forward and picked up the citation record again. Mr. Thompson, something about these 17 violations stands out to me. Every single one was issued within the window of 2:15 to 3:45 in the afternoon. Is there a reason for that pattern? Marcus blinked. It was clear no one had identified that pattern before. That is when I collect the children from school, Your Honor. Your rideshare shift is scheduled to end at 3, correct? Yes, ma'am, but the records show you are consistently working past that time. He nodded slowly. The afternoon surge pricing window runs from around 2 until 4. During that stretch, I can nearly double what I earn in the morning hours. That additional income is the margin between making rent and falling short. I set the papers down. So to be precise about this, you are extending your commercial driving time into the same window when you are supposed to be picking up your children, because those 2 additional hours of surge-priced fares are what keep your household financially viable. Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor responded immediately. Your Honor, that framing actually compounds the problem. The defendant is making a deliberate choice to break the law for financial benefit. I raised one finger, one single finger. It is a gesture I have refined across 4 decades on this bench, and everyone familiar with my courtroom understands its meaning without being told. It means stop talking and give me a moment to think. Mr. Thompson, where do your children wait when your pickup is running late? The school operates an after-hours program. The cost is $15 per child per hour. 3 children, $45 per hour. If Marcus was running 30 to 45 minutes behind on a regular basis, that translated to an additional $30 to $45 in childcare costs he could not comfortably absorb, but was absorbing anyway because the surge pricing income exceeded what the after-hours care was costing him. This man had constructed his entire existence as a precision financial calculation where every variable was denominated in dollars and minutes, and a single error in any column meant his family went without something they needed. What is the total you currently owe across all outstanding fines? $6,800, Your Honor. That number hit the room like something dropped from a height. $6,800 owed by a man sitting in a courtroom with his daughter's juice box as his only meal. And if that balance results in a license suspension, my rideshare account gets deactivated. That eliminates one income source entirely, which means you cannot cover rent, which means losing the apartment. And losing the apartment means my children entered the foster care system because I would be technically without housing. There it was. The actual stakes were not traffic violations or commercial permit compliance. The actual question before me was whether 3 children would have a father at home or a caseworker assigned to their file. I sat back. "Mr. Hernandez," I said, addressing the prosecutor, "you are correct that the legal framework here is straightforward. These regulations were created for legitimate purposes, but I want you to work through something with me. If this court suspends Mr. Thompson's ability to work, what is the outcome for those 3 children?" His expression told me he had already run that calculation. "Your Honor, I understand the complexity, but the principle of selective enforcement based on individual sympathy creates serious problems for the integrity of the regulatory system. I am not discussing sympathy, Counselor. I am discussing consequences. The city currently spends approximately $6,000 per month per child in foster care. For 3 children, that is $18,000 monthly. Across 1 year, that represents $216,000 in public funds. And that projection assumes all 3 children are placed together, which the statistical reality of the foster care system makes unlikely. Factor in trauma therapy, additional caseworker hours, and the legal costs of custody proceedings. The fiscal exposure grows substantially from there. Mr. Thompson owes $6,800. Even setting aside the fact that payment is currently impossible for him, that amount flows once to the city. If his license is suspended instead, the city begins an ongoing monthly expenditure that dwarfs the fine amount within the first few weeks. From a purely fiscal standpoint, which outcome serves the public interest? The prosecutor opened his mouth, then closed it. He was perceptive enough to recognize the position the argument had placed him in. There was no response available that did not make the city appear either indifferent to the consequences of its own policies or fiscally careless with public funds. But I was not finished. "Mr. Thompson, I have reviewed your complete file, not the citation record alone. Everything. Before your wife's illness, you were working as a loan officer. Your annual salary was $78,000. Following her death, you took 3 months away from employment to manage your grief and care for your children. When you returned to the workforce, your position had been filled. You have been sustaining these 3 jobs for 18 months in an attempt to rebuild financial stability." Marcus's eyes filled. No one in that process had paused long enough to read the full story. They had seen a man accumulating violations and treated that as the complete picture. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I understand that I broke the law. I am not here asking to be treated as an exception. I just need a path forward that does not cost my children their home." That was the moment I arrived at a decision that subsequently appeared in the local news, generated both strong support and pointed criticism, and permanently altered the way I thought about what sentencing is actually for. Here is what is going to happen. I am consolidating all 17 citations into a single case. The total obligation is $6,800. You are going to pay it in full. Marcus's expression fell. He began to respond, but I raised my hand. You are going to satisfy $5,000 of that total through 200 hours of community service, valued at $25 per hour. The remaining $1,800 will be paid in monthly installments of $50 over 3 years. No interest will accrue. The prosecutor rose. Your Honor, community service is not a recognized sentencing option in commercial driving violation cases under the applicable statute. Judicial discretion in sentencing exists for reasons, Counselor. I am exercising it. I turned back to Marcus. Your community service hours will be completed on weekends. The assignment is renovation work at the community center in your neighborhood. The center has work that needs to be done. You have hours that need to be completed. Your children may accompany you. There is a supervised program for kids running at the same time. What I said next was something I had been working through for the previous 10 minutes while watching this man hold himself together by whatever remained available to him. Furthermore, the license suspension is stayed pending your completion of the community service obligation. You may continue operating commercially you will report to this court on a monthly basis. A single missed payment, a single missed community service session, or a single additional citation will trigger the full suspension immediately and without further hearing. Do you understand those terms completely? Marcus nodded, and the tears he had been containing came through. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. I will not disappoint you. Do not thank me yet. 200 hours of physical work are ahead of you. And Mr. Thompson, your children are observing how you respond to this. Show them what it looks like to get back up and do what needs to be done. I will, Your Honor. After Marcus had left, the prosecutor approached the bench. Your Honor, with respect, the sentence you just imposed creates a template that defendants across this city will attempt to invoke in every future traffic matter. No, Counselor, I said. What I created was a solution that serves justice more effectively than rigid procedural compliance would have. There is a meaningful difference between those two things. I leaned forward slightly. Walk me through who benefits if we suspend that man's license. Not the city, not his children, not society in any measurable way. The only outcome that pure rule enforcement produces in this case is the satisfaction of having applied a rule. That is not justice. That is institutional procedure wearing the appearance of principle. The prosecutor left without continuing the argument. What he was not aware of was that I had already made 3 calls during the lunch recess. The first was to the director of the community center. Using funds from the courthouse discretionary budget, I had arranged for lunch to be provided to Marcus and his children on every Saturday they came to work. The second call went to a colleague who directed a job placement program for individuals re-entering professional employment after a gap. Marcus's background as a loan officer represented genuine marketable experience, and I was aware of 2 financial institutions actively recruiting qualified candidates. The third call was to my own insurance contact. I wanted a complete and precise understanding of the legal and financial implications of Marcus's situation. What I learned from that conversation reinforced that I had reached the right decision. 3 weeks later, my clerk placed an envelope on my desk. The return address was Marcus Thompson's. Inside was a handwritten note on paper torn from a spiral notebook. Your Honor, I wanted you to know that I have been invited to interview at First National Bank for a loan officer position. The interview is scheduled for next Tuesday. My children helped me select a tie at the thrift store. Whatever the outcome, I wanted to express my gratitude for giving me the opportunity to remain in my children's lives while I address my mistakes. We completed our first weekend at the community center. The director mentioned that Emma asked if she could help paint the children's room. She told him that her father had taught her something. When someone extends a chance to you, you give back twice as much in return. I am passing that on to them because you passed it on to me. Respectfully, Marcus Thompson. I read that letter 3 times. Then I placed it in the drawer in my desk, where I keep the things that remind me why this work matters. Marcus was offered the position at First National Bank. The starting salary was $52,000, below where he had been before, but sufficient. He reduced to a single job. His nightly sleep extended beyond 4 hours for the first time in nearly 2 years. His children stopped arriving at school with the signs of exhaustion written across their faces. But the part of this story that stayed with me most came 6 months after sentencing, when Marcus reappeared in my courtroom. Not because of any new matter. He had completed all 200 hours of community service ahead of schedule and wanted to begin making his monthly installment payments early. Mr. Thompson, I said, genuinely surprised to see him. You are not scheduled to appear here for another 3 months. I am aware, Your Honor, but I wanted to make 3 months of payments at once, and I had something I wanted you to see. He held up his phone. The photograph on the screen showed Emma standing in front of a freshly renovated room at the community center. The walls had been painted a bright, warm yellow. New shelving lined the walls, filled with books. A reading corner had been built into one end, with cushions arranged across the floor. Emma and I planned that room together, he said. The center director told me children started showing up after school every day to read and work on homework. It has become the most used space in the building. His voice thickened. Your Honor, You had every legal justification to take my license that day. Instead, you gave me the means to show my children that a mistake does not determine who you are. The way you respond to it does." He paused for a moment. "Emma told me recently that she wants to become a judge. She said that judges help people fix their lives, rather than simply punishing them for having made them worse. That single observation from a child is the reason I have remained on this bench for 4 decades. Not the salary, not the authority it carries, the occasional opportunity to watch someone rebuild their life when given genuine support rather than punishment designed only to satisfy a procedural obligation." But the story did not end there, because what followed demonstrated something I have observed across many years. One well-considered decision creates consequences that travel further than anyone sitting in that courtroom could have anticipated. The community center director called me 2 months after Marcus completed his service. Following the completion of Marcus's hours, 7 other residents from the surrounding neighborhood had approached the center asking to volunteer for renovation work. They had heard what had happened and wanted to contribute in the same way. The center now had more volunteers than it could immediately deploy, and a project list extending across the following year. The director asked whether I had the authority to establish a formal program allowing defendants facing license suspension due to unpaid fines to elect community service as an alternative path forward. I convened a meeting that included the city prosecutor, the public defender's office, and representatives from neighborhood organizations. Together, we developed what became the Restorative Justice Traffic Program. Defendants with clean records who faced suspension over accumulated unpaid fines could apply for consideration. The program was not available to all. Repeat offenders, individuals with driving under the influence charges, and reckless driving cases were excluded. But people in circumstances similar to Marcus, people who had made mistakes while navigating situations that had become genuinely unmanageable, had a structured path forward available to them. The program launched 4 months after Marcus's case was resolved. In its first year of operation, 63 people participated. The city's projected savings in foster care and social services costs came to an estimated $1.2 million. The community center completed its full renovation. 3 neighborhood parks received new playground equipment through service hours. The figure that mattered most to me personally was this one. 61 of those 63 participants kept their licenses. 61 families remained intact. 61 people held on to their employment, their housing, and the stability that made everything else possible. 2 participants did not complete the program. One violated the terms of probation. The other stopped attending service sessions midway through. But 61 out of 63 represents a success rate that no conventional punishment model has ever come close to producing in comparable circumstances. Marcus Thompson became something none of us in that courtroom had imagined when he first walked through the doors. He became a resource for other people. When new participants entered the program, the community center director began introducing them to Marcus. He would tell them his story. He would show them what was possible when the decision was made to do the work rather than walk away from it. I watched a man who had once been unable to see past the demands of his next shift become someone capable of helping others find their way through the same terrain he had crossed. That is what genuine transformation looks like, not the elimination of consequences. The growth that becomes possible when consequences are connected to something constructive rather than purely punitive. Let me address directly something that comes up every time I tell a story like this one. The question of whether sentences like Marcus's represent an absence of accountability. Marcus did not avoid accountability. He completed 200 hours of physical labor. He repaid every dollar of what he owed. He completed both parenting classes and financial counseling as additional conditions of the arrangement. When measured against the actual work involved, his accountability was more substantial than a straightforward license suspension would have required of him. The distinction is that his accountability produced something real rather than eliminating something necessary. The traditional enforcement path in Marcus's case would have cost him his employment, his housing, and his children's home environment. The state's average expenditure per child in foster care runs approximately $45,000 annually. For two children, that represents $90,000 in public funds per year, before accounting for the legal costs of custody proceedings, the additional caseworker hours, or the longer-term social costs of the trauma involved. Marcus himself, stripped of his ability to work legally, would have faced cascading pressures likely to produce further violations and possible incarceration. The conservative taxpayer cost of the conventional approach over a 5-year window reaches $500,000. The cost of the restorative alternative was administrative oversight and community center renovation projects that improved quality of life for an entire neighborhood. The question of which approach is genuinely tough answers itself when the numbers are placed side by side. What 43 years on this bench has taught me is this: punishment that serves no constructive function does not rehabilitate anyone. It satisfies a cultural appetite for retribution, but it does not address the underlying conditions that produce the behavior, and it reliably generates new problems in place of the ones it was designed to resolve. Justice that is functioning correctly asks a different set of questions. Not how do we cause this person to suffer in proportion to what they did, but how do we address the harm that occurred and reduce the probability of it occurring again? That answer sometimes requires incarceration. People who represent a genuine danger to others need to be separated from the public. But Marcus Thompson was not a dangerous person. He was a desperate one. The distance between those two conditions is enormous, and collapsing it in the name of procedural consistency is not justice. It is the appearance of justice substituting for the real thing. 3 years following his case, Marcus was promoted to shift supervisor at his place of employment. The salary increase made it possible for the family to relocate to a neighborhood with stronger schools and safer streets for Emma and James. He called when it happened, not because he was obligated to, because he wanted to share it. "Your Honor," he said, "I wanted you to know about the promotion, and I wanted to say that none of what has happened since that day in your courtroom would have been possible if you had taken my license." I gave him the same answer I will give you now. I did nothing extraordinary. I listened. I looked at the complete picture rather than the citation summary alone. And I chose the path that served everyone's interests, including the cities and societies. That is not a radical position. It is a practical one. The Restorative Justice Traffic Program continues operating today. It has expanded into 3 additional counties. Other judges have incorporated similar frameworks into their own practices. The data produced consistently across all of those jurisdictions shows the same pattern. When structure, genuine support, and accountability aimed at building rather than dismantling are provided together, people rise to meet them, not universally. Some individuals are not prepared to do the work. Some will not follow through regardless of what is offered, but the majority will. Most people, when given a real and structured opportunity to repair their situation, will take it seriously.